This week on The Century Speaks, we look at childhood. In Growing Up, Essex people talk about carefree days of roaming free outside and playing sports and games. Others describe helping parents in the house and on the farm. Later, the programme features the pressures and responsibilities of being a teenager, sexual awakening and first relationships.
Before I went to school of a morning, I used to have to clear away the breakfast things and wash up. When I came home from school, then the other jobs had to be done, doing the carpets, washing the floor and things like that. Mother had 3 boys under the age of 5, because I was the eldest. And these things sort of automatically fell to me to be able to do. I'd been taught how to do them, I'd been brought up like that, so that I always helped. And that was how it was always to be.
Very few days were spent carefree. There was always the worry of the farm and getting the work done, and the cows and calves and chickens and pigs and ducks, and everything had to be looked after. The dogs too were always having puppies in those days, and they all had to be looked after. The eggs always had to be collected, and the hens laid all over the place, all over the farm, in the hedge, everywhere, and that was a big job to go and get all those eggs in. And then in the autumn the apples all had to be picked, and all the fruit had to be put in bottles, and there was such a lot to do all the time that when it came to the summer holidays from school, it was just work, 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 work all the time. I suppose looking back it was quite an adventure, but I didn't think that at the time. I was too worried about whether we were going to make any money to live on, and so I knew I had to work hard to help them. All the time that was uppermost in my mind, and if I could do something to help them, that made me happy. I loved the hens and I loved the ducks, and I used to sit them in fruit boxes with eggs under them and hatch out little ducks every spring, and the calves, when they were born, we had to teach them to drink milk out of a pail. And the horses, I loved the horses, the big cart horses. Used to sit on their backs when we went to cut the kale for the cows in the winter.
In those days, everything was done by hand. So everyone on the farms, and that included us children, used to have to help. And believe it or not, we loved it because we were out in the fields. We used to have to do that more or less for nothing, just to keep your family happy with the farmer, because he expected all this. Things like stacking the sheaves into what we called stooks or trays, according to where you live. As young lads, and I'm talking about 10, 11 years old, we used to lead these great big farm horses pulling the wagons, loaded and unloaded, to and from the fields, through the narrow lanes and through the gateways to the farmyard, or where the stacks were being made, and then back to the field. And I often wonder now how lucky we must have been. It must have been that the horses knew the way better than we did, but how we never fell under the wheels, or I wouldn't dare think about it.
I can't remember when we first got a playground as such in Dovercourt, but I would guess I'd be about 10 years old before that arrived, and prior to that there was absolutely nothing. In Bathside in particular, our playground was known as the Bathside Mud. Now this was one of the best adventure playgrounds that you could dream of. It would be closed now if it were available. But after the war, part of the fleet was dismantled in Harwich, and resulting from this, there was a scrap metal dealer. And he had access to all the things that were taken off some of these cruisers, battleships, whatever. So on the Barside mud, which was not fenced off at all, enormous area, probably about sort of 2 miles square. It's all built on there, it's not there anymore. But we had guns that when I say used to work, of course they didn't have any ammunition. But the ones where you put your hands either side of a wheel and they've got a handle either side and you could turn it, and these guns used to go up and down. They were big things. And during the summer holidays, we had a pair of rope shoes, soled shoes that your father had made while he'd been at sea, a pair of shorts, and that was it. You left the house at 8 o'clock in the morning and you didn't come back until it was dark. Beach landing craft was on the other side of the sea wall. How anybody was never killed on that, I don't know, because we actually got this thing to work. It was about 10 of us kids used to wind this handle and up would come the drawbridge, whatever it's called, the bow anyway. And then we found that we could put a large bolt in there and knock it out with a hammer, and then this thing would rattle all the way down again.
Actually, 6 children was regarded as a more average one. There were families with 7, 8 or 9 children, you see. You played together as much as you could. You made your own entertainments, which brings to me a very important point. All you hear today is, oh, there's nothing for the children to do. Well, there's plenty for children to do if they like to get down to it. And nowadays they've got lovely recreation fields. So I'm quite upset sometimes when they complain. We used to, as we got older, obviously the older one would take charge of the younger ones. Being the older one, I was the one, of course, but we'd go for long walks, perhaps down to the riverside. And as we got older, we used to find a little place, for example, down near the waterworks at Langham. That's the waterworks near Colchester. And we used to find a wide, shallow place and splash about and try to swim in reasonable safety in those days. Take our sandwiches and eat on the bank, and that to us was one of the great things of being in the country, you see. One place lived at Little Hallingbury. We used to go across marshy meadows, say. You'd find things like cowslips, kingcups, which is a sort of that's a marsh plant really, but they were there to see, and we realised how beautiful they were really. When I moved to a place called Long Melford, we lived right near to a little railway junction. We watched the trains hour after hour.
To play kit can, hopscotch, things like that, didn't they? And then my mum would come to the bottom of the alleyway shouting, "It's time to come in, ready for bed." And I'd say, "Another 10 minutes, Mum," and we'd stay out another 10 minutes and play one more game, and then very reluctantly used to go home, have our knees scrubbed and our faces washed, and it was time for bed. No, we used to go and play and make camps, but in trees, not under the ground. And Mum used to give us a bottle of water and jam sandwiches to take with us. There was a kit can. I think the can was stood on the top of the drain, and we all ran off to hide, and someone was the person who was in charge of the can, and people gradually crept up. The other children used to catch up and used to have to hide, and if the person in charge of the can saw you, you were out. But the whole aim of the game was to creep up and kick the can before whoever was in charge caught you.
We would put stones in the can, so that if anybody did get near it, that would make a noise. You would hide in the gardens around, and then the person had to then come out and try and find the people hiding. Obviously, the further and further they got, if anybody was really good at hiding, they would be closer, and they would run and catch the can, and then kick the can, and then it would make the noise, so everybody would know that the game was over.
We add one person's on, and you run off and they have to try and add you, and then when they add you, then you're on. hide and seek. One person's on, they turn away and count up to a certain number, and then we all go off and hide, and when they find you, then you're on and you have to count, and then they go off and hide and curbsy. One person's on each side of the road and they throw a ball across the road to the curbs, and if they hit the corner of the curb and the ball bounces back, then they've got a curbsy.
Then there was hopscotch, which I think everybody used to play hopscotch years ago. I really enjoyed that. That was good. If you could get a really good stone, that was really good for hopscotch. You used to have your favourite stone you took home with you. And also another one was, I didn't have a bike till I was a bit older. I can always remember this. And I used to have to borrow a bike. And we used to chase all round the block, round the alleys and into the road again. I did play tennis up the end terraced house wall with a ball. And the lady used to get really cross and come out and moan because of the constant thump of the tennis ball up the wall. And now I can understand why. Poor woman.
It's mainly football what I like to play a lot, and I watch a lot of football as well. There's a field by Manor School where I play with my friends. I make our own pitches and everything. But I'm near my friend's house all the time because his house is right near enough on top of the field so they can keep an eye on everything. We sometimes make up like leagues and make up teams, like go around the school and ask people to be on our teams, and we make big 11-side teams, and it's really good. Getting exercise, having a good time, because otherwise you'll just be unfit and just be sitting in front of TV all day, which I do a lot, but I still play football a lot to get a lot of exercise. And during summer holidays I'm normally out playing football or going out and to Lakeside and with mum and dad buying clothes.
I was a great ball sportsman, be a sportsman, anything with a ball. When we never had a ball, we used to get newspapers, make it into a ball, tie it up with string and use the ball, because we never had money to buy a ball. Football was a luxury, and we played football with a paper ball, 6 or 7 a side. If we had a tennis ball, we played cricket, put the 2 coats down. That's why I think in the old days we had such good footballers and we had such good cricketers, because they played under conditions that the people today don't play under. At the bottom of one of our streets we used to have a sand receptacle for when the weather was a bit bad. They used to put the sand in it, you see. And we used to put white chalk marks on there. When we could buy a pair of roller skates, ball bearing roller skates, we used to use banana coshes as ice sticks. Now banana coshes, people might say, what's a banana cosh? Well, that was a big cosh where all the hands of bananas used to grow on. And they used to cut the hands of bananas off and it left a great big cosh. We couldn't afford hockey sticks, so we used to use that as hockey sticks. We got them in the markets. And there used to be a bloke there called Jackie Banana. That was his nickname because he sold nothing else but bananas. Skipping ropes we used to get off of orange boxes, because all the orange boxes in those days were done up with like a raffia tape type of thing. So we plaited that, and that's where we had our skipping rope. Fish boxes we used to break up, chop up and dig up the road and get tarry blocks. Put the tarry blocks outside the fish to hide it. We used to sell that for a penny a bundle, knock on the door, you see. So you was always foraging and you always enjoyed yourself.
We used to go lead scratching as well. When the scrap metal dealer used to melt down these certain parts of boats, they had a big cauldron over there, but all the lead used to go in. You used to move it around, like if there was a chunk of battleship, 500 yards away, rather than bring the part of the battleship over to the cauldron used to go there. So it was on different sites all over this mud area. And then we used to get knives and pieces of stick and whatever and scratch the spilt lead out from underneath the soil. And then when we got enough of it together, we'd bag it all up and take it off and sell it to him. We used to get pocket money that way.
When I was a child, childhood really didn't end till about 15 or 16 years old. I can certainly remember not being allowed to go out with boys on my own until I'd left school, which would be unheard of now. We wore short white socks until we were in the 4th year at school, and I was at a secondary modern school, not a grammar school. It wasn't a posh school. So, childhood, I think, was extended by about 5 years on what it is now. I think, childhood now seems to end for girls at about 13 years of age. This illustration, which I'll just read, I was nearly 11 at the time, and it shows how naive 11-year-olds were in 1958, how different things have become. I've written about my day. It was a Saturday, and I made my first cup of tea for 2. I listened to Saturday matinee called Something for Nothing on the radio. I am listening to it now. I had a wagon wheel for tea. I am sitting comfortably by the fire, and I am very happy. I wish I always felt like this. We were keen to grow up, but our terms of growing up were much smaller than terms of growing up now. Our idea of being grown up was to actually go out with a boy on your own. That was really something. Or to actually go out at night on your own with a group of friends. We didn't really do that till about 15 or 16 years old. So yes, we were anxious to grow up, but grown up meant something different. Then there came quite a change between sort of 16 and 18 years old, and then I think the hippie era was taking off, and the Beatles and everything like that, and sort of everybody suddenly became quite rebellious in their own way. It became a great thing to be banned from the local coffee bar if you could be.
Oh yeah, I'll tell you something, I think you'll understand when I say that something.
You can go to the Hollywood's under 18s. That's quite a good one. But there's none others really, because places like Pulse, they don't have under 18 things. Like they may have like Christmas. We have a really good time. It's like talking, dancing, have a drink and something. Just sit down. Yeah, there's skills there. I think they enjoy it as much as we do. The thing is, they just get all tarted up, like putting all their makeup. Like we just put on a shirt, jeans, do their hair, and that's it. They just like do their hair, do their eyes, do their eyebrows. Oh, I just could never be a girl. Sometimes I think it looks worse. Like when they put loads of blush on their eyes, it makes it look like they've been in a fight and they've got black eyes and things. It's like boy sees girl, they have a dance, snog each other a couple of times, and that's about it. Then we go home, like all the parents are waiting outside. They go, "Oh, did you have a good time?" And like, they don't know what's happened or anything. Like you could have been in a massive fight, and they just wouldn't know. They're just waiting. "Oh, did you have a good time?" "Yeah, it was good."
You could walk out them days in the dark, go up the high streets, look in all the shops at the dresses and that. Perhaps find yourself a bloke. I don't know whether Mary's talking about the same high street, East Ham High Street. It was named as Monkey's Parade. Yes. Because we used to walk up there and see if we could pick up, walk down one side, walk down the other side. Yeah. I picked up a few. I came unstuck one time though. We walked to Wanstead Flats. We were sitting there and talking, and all of a sudden he started getting a bit, funny. So I said, "Excuse me," I said, "I'm not one of those." So he said, "You've got a lot to learn." I said, "Yes, but you're not going to teach me." Up I got and off I went.
Yeah, everyone thinks, you're learning your new things, your sort of coming of age thing where you're learning everything and going out and experimenting with this, that and the other. I think it's a lot to do with this generation from generally like the media with what's been going on with like teenagers running off and doing this and teen pregnancies and drugs and everything. I mean, we're supposed to be all evil and running around having illicit love affairs and taking drugs left, right and centre and smoking everything, but very ordinary. People expect that you're going to sort of turn into this stroppy, sort of very aggressive, tortured sort of soul. My sister's always going about, you've gone into teenage mode, and I'm just a bit off with her, and so anything has made an excuse of me being a teenager.
I think it's a harder world too for youngsters growing up than what we had. Life was much easier, more straightforward, whereas I think the younger generation have it's a lot more going for them, but it's harder as well. Expectations are much higher for people, these younger people, than what they were for Morris and I think. People didn't expect so much out of life, whereas now they feel they've got to achieve something all the time. You hear a lot of the sort of bad generation, the young ones going wrong, but you don't hear enough of what the ones that carry on and do a lot of good, don't they? A lot of helpful youngsters about these. More can I say, they think more these days than what we did probably. We accepted things. If things weren't quite right with the world, that's just too bad. Never thought the right way. But whereas now the younger ones do think more about things that are going on around them, I think, than what we ever did. Good luck to them.
There's so much more responsibility that you do have to grow up ever so quickly. I feel, all of a sudden you're a child, and then now, I'm 16. Everybody's driving. I've got to decide what university I want to go to, which is what job I'm going to have for the rest of my life. There's a lot of pressure to all of a sudden forget a lot of your leisure and your childhood and sort of get stuck into adulthood. It is a big jump, and a lot of people obviously can't cope with it. There's a lot of teenage depression, and I can quite understand how people do get so anxious and don't come to school, because there's so much pressure at such a young age. When you think my grandparents' generation, they were working at 14, obviously that was a lot of responsibility, but in a different way. They'd work in a factory or a shoe shop or whatever for, 9 till 6 and then come home. Whereas this is decision making, it's all your own autonomy and just making such big decisions. It's not simple, you don't go out so you can pay your parents some rent because they can't cope financially. It's a lot more important than that. So in different ways.
There was none of this question and not understanding girls, shall we say. You grew up with them. Mind you wouldn't dare go near your sister if she was dressing or undressing. We knew nothing about sex. When I went in the army, I was told some things that were pretty obvious pretty quickly, and they didn't beat about the bush. But then again, that was partly for our protection. Parents wouldn't dream. If I tried to ask questions, probably one of my great regrets, when I remember asking questions, you realise things were happening. You were poo-hooed out as, what on earth do you want to talk about? Well, you wouldn't even be entered to, So you couldn't have a discussion on sex with your parents in those days. I feel that you're right at the point now where we've crossed the road in that respect. I must admit, I didn't find it too easy in my life, but I'm sure that I was able to deal with the everyday questions. But of course, I think with my children, they were getting some instruction at school, seeing as they picked things up pretty quickly. But I think now, in this new modern age, that parents should discuss matters, and fairly early on, really, when it's not involving the actual thing happening, really. Before, like girls, like Grace, she didn't know things when things happened. They were frightened out of their life. That's wrong. A girl should certainly be told.
I did it in primary school down the road, but my parents have never ever said anything to me about. I've never wanted to ask. It's just my mum's come in my room once and looked through my work about sex education, and she's going, "Oh, you learn about all them things yet?" And I'm going, yes, mum, and she just wouldn't go away. But I never speak to mum about some people in the class do. We learn about it in school, and this woman comes around and tells you sometimes once every term or something like that, and she calls herself Knits, Tits and Dangly Bits Woman, and she just brings in all these videos of growing up and things like that. So when you're in your friends, you go, oh, ha, ha, look at that. It's quite funny. But when you're on your own, I think you would take it more seriously, understand it more, see what they're getting at.
Although I was given quite a bit of freedom I was quite naive when it came to sex. And I'll tell you a tale which you most probably will think is really outlandish, but one particular day I saw these two dogs out in the street and they were obviously having sex, you know. I said to my mother, "What are they doing?" And she said, "Oh, they're making puppies," you see. And I thought, well, this must be what happens when you want to have a baby. Without lying to you, I was so frightened. I knew there had to be a male and a female. And I actually thought the man jumped on the lady's back. And so if I was in a queue and there was a chap behind me, I used to think, oh no, please don't push against me because I am going to get pregnant. And it wasn't until a friend of mine was about 17, she got pregnant and she told me, and I was amazed. I was about 17 myself and I said to her, "How does the baby come out?" And she said, "Well, you know, the same way it went in, basically." And I thought, no, that can't be true. She's winding me up. It took a lot of convincing for me to realise that that is what happens. As far as I was concerned, you know, and my mother had perpetuated this, a woman's body, you know, and a man's body finishes at the waist. What went on below the waist was not to do with me, and you don't learn these things until you're married.
After the pill was invented, sex began to be talked about openly, and then if a girl of 15 came in, I would tell her she must come in with her mother. I wouldn't give the pill to anybody under 16. But these kids now are aware of sex from early days, 10, 11, 12 onwards. They can have sex freely, which they do, because even if they don't use the pill now, they will chance getting pregnant because they know they can get an abortion. And many of them don't bother with contraception. With the HIV virus, the AIDS epidemic, really changed the minds of some of them, particularly the males, and they use the condom now, I suppose, in many cases. But of course we have to warn people. One young girl came to me, by the way, she was about 18, she wasn't very young, and she wondered about contraception. So I said, well, there's only 3 methods. I said there's the pill, there's the barrier method, which means anything, a diaphragm or condom, or I said there's abstinence. So she said, what do you mean abstinence? So I said, you don't do it. And she was horrified. She really was genuinely horrified that I should tell her that she mustn't have sex.
Like, a few of my friends have got boyfriends and sort of like having sort of sexual relationships and that, and a couple of them have sort of like nearly got pregnant or like missed sort of their period and this lot, and we've often talked about like what they think they're going to do if they do actually get pregnant. I know they're sort of silly enough if they do get sort of pregnant because they haven't used sort of condoms or anything like that, or safety. There's so many young people sort of having sex nowadays that people my age feel pressured that you should be doing it. If like there's some like 13-year-old, you feel, oh, maybe I should sort of be doing it. I remember when I, like in say secondary school, I think that's the most when you get pressured because college people are grown up. I mean, when I was 13, I wasn't even thinking about boys, and you think, God, how... I think people have matured. I mean, at the age of 13, I think they're so mature now, rather than... I know it's only like a few years since I was 13, but I think it has changed, like, they've suddenly changed, and that really scares me, to be honest. Like, when you're 13, you shouldn't be worrying about boyfriends, you shouldn't be worrying about sex and this lot, and you shouldn't have the pressures onto you. At that age, you should be enjoying yourself and not worrying about it, really. My friend at college now, she hasn't, and she's very proud of it, and I'm proud of her for being proud of it, if that makes sense. Just the same as me, she's waiting for the right person. She's not the same as everyone else. You can be individual nowadays. I think it should just be up to the individual, and there should be no pressure, because people are rushing into it and they're making silly mistakes and this lot. A lot of people just want to get sex over and done with, sort of thing, just so they can sort of say, oh, like, I've done it. So they aren't that person who's like still the virgin, the big V or whatever they call it.
In part 7 of The Century Speaks, Growing Up, you heard the voices of Maggie Mitchell, Nancy Cannon, Eric Moy, Bob Richardson, Carol and Michael Hines, Lee Callender, George Mooney, David Callender, Pamela Jenner, Shona Handley, Joyce Carter, Laura Eaton, Joan Syrett, Joseph Finer, Ivy Roberts, Mary Lickfold, Gemma Millis and Nicholas Erie.